Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Yeadon. I'm the CEO and co-founder with Impetus Digital. At Impetus Digital, we have built some of the best-in-class co-creation, collaboration, and communication tools using our Impetus Insight platform. We've actually been helping life science companies from across the globe over the past 13 years do everything from digital advisory boards, online investigator meetings, medical education that's done online, and all kinds of other collaboration tools. Since the launch of our award-winning Insight Events platform, we've also helped pharma companies do things like large-scale MSL and sales rep training. We've been doing innovation hackathons, corporate events, and everything else that you can imagine. But more importantly, at Impetus, we really believe that everything starts with a conversation. And from these big, hairy, audacious conversations, we can work with some of the leading edge thinkers, the digital provocateurs, the healthcare thought leaders, to work to collectively and positively disrupt healthcare. So I'm super thrilled to having one of these thought leaders with me today. This is actually Laurence Pearce. He's the founder and CEO of a company called Xim Ltd. They're actually developers of a product called Lifelight. This is actually a product that enables standard smartphones to perform contactless measurement of blood pressure and other really important vital signs for patients. It's built on clinical grade and with clinical grade accuracy. Xim is a digital health technology company that has extensive experience spanning over 15 years in digital and research excellence. And for the last 5 years, Laurence has led the development of the company's flagship innovation, Lifelight, and this is a very novel tech solution. Laurence has over 20 years of experience in healthcare informatics and has led numerous digital strategy and risk reviews. He's done business case developments as well as major IT procurements. Laurence's experience covers primary care healthcare systems, hospital EMRs, population health records, as well as health data privacy. Laurence is passionate about the human application of technology in terms of user experience, computer vision, machine learning, and connected digital health. Welcome, Laurence. So happy to have you on the show today.
Natalie, that's a great intro. Thank you very much. And I hope I can be a digital health provocateur. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Even if it is virtual, it still feels like there's a far side around here somewhere. So great to meet you, and looking forward to our conversation.
That's wonderful. I want to say, I love the fact that you've had a very interesting career. You've done a lot of things. You have a lot of interest in, computer vision, machine learning. You've been doing a lot of work with hospitals, et cetera. And then you've become an entrepreneur. So tell us a little bit about that trajectory and what has brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. So originally computer scientist, I was always really interested in digital art as well. So there's been a kind of creative strand through my work and through the career. I worked in the software industry for a few years originally, then I studied an MBA. Then I went to work for Founder of Europe, which was not really a creative job, but it helped me to focus, to do business planning, to be more structured. And very quickly from there, I moved into medtech, primarily through a friend that was at medical school who had developed really a mental health EMR and needed some guidance on how to productize that, to commercialize it. And that just seemed so much more exciting than working in a big corporate. So I guess that was really the start of the entrepreneurial kind of side. I could see the opportunities in healthcare are huge, but we have so many challenges that it needs people who are thinking differently, almost like kind of guerrilla tactics to try to think in new ways, bring new ideas and challenges. So it's been a long journey, but I've always been looking for the big idea. So I think really having an MBA means you tend to kill a lot of ideas in your head. You've got like a little kind of dragon's den taking place in your head all the time. When you're thinking of things, you see opportunities, you kill them really quickly because there's no market, there's difficult competition, there's no value proposition. So really that was kind of the lead up to this Lifelight technology. This was one my brain couldn't kill. So I kept sort of thinking, but what if this happens? What if that happens? And it was one of those, it just fitted with so many, it resonated really around the experience of trying to do things like assisted living, assistive technologies for seniors, trying to find ways to help people to live independently. I guess the other part of my passion has been making technology invisible. It's kind of finding ways to overcome friction and moving us from, to get how do we empower people to self-manage? Because the really big challenge is sustainable healthcare. How can we're all living longer? How do we have a health system that's there to sustain health rather than fixing people when they break? Kind of crudely, it's like people call it the sick care system rather than a healthcare system. So that's been my kind of back of my mind. That's the big mega challenge. How can we find ways to use these amazing technologies to support that?
Lovely. And I love how you're using the right and left brain piece of your sort of logistical programming with the artful way. It sounds very Steve Jobs to me. So, which is really interesting. So you actually bring up something really important, and that is there's a lot going on in the tech space. We have giant tech, we have all kinds of stuff going in DeFi and all kinds of other things happening in clean tech. And it seems to be this rapid fire that's happening, change is happening in an accelerated fashion. And then we have healthcare. Healthcare is just a different animal. It's more than complex. It's one of these things that just requires systems innovations thinking. It's a very, very difficult, ball of yarn that has to be unraveled and then re-put together. Tell us what the problem statement was, or what that key thing that was locked in your head that you said you couldn't sort of talk yourself out of, that you said this needs a solution, and was really, I guess, the impetus, if you don't mind me using, no pun intended, for you to really start Xim Limited.
I think it's really around looking for that kind of bringing together the technologies of computer vision, emotion recognition. These were actually things that I was doing as creative projects. So we were doing some really cool things like museum installations. So kids could walk up to a camera on a wall and completely contactlessly have an engagement and a conversation with a animated violin, who would then bring an orchestra in and create music that would change according to the child's emotion. And it was so much fun to do. It was a really great project. And I was thinking, how can that help healthcare? What could we do with that could be creating something that empowers people and motivates them to self-manage their health? So that might seem quite a kind of random starting point, but that led to looking into a lot of the kind of new blue sky work in R&D on computer vision. So what can be done with a camera? And cameras are ubiquitous. Every home has at least 10 cameras now on the different devices. These things are everywhere. We'll talk about privacy in a moment, because that's the counter side of this kind of explosion in tech. But really, it was the opportunity to kind of, how can we take this amazing stuff that kids love to engage with, it's really natural, and create something that's really of value, that has some medical rigor and utility to it. I think also on a personal note, my mother had a stroke. This was back in 2006, and she had what, like a lot of people, a lot of seniors, she had one of those pendant alarm given to her. And I remember saying to the time, why didn't you press your pendant? And she said, oh, I can't wear that thing. It's so unfashionable. It's like this big cream plastic box. I feel like cattle having this thing stuck around my neck all the time. It's horrible. And I just thought, yeah, this is the thing. We kind of dehumanize. There's a danger of kind of treating seniors almost like cattle. It's like, give them these boxes, they press the button, and then somebody will come and help. I thought, we've got to make this more invisible. It's got to be so natural to support people. So I was looking at things like the fall detection tech and predictive algorithms, thinking, how can we make all of this more affordable, more scalable? And what are the drivers? What leads to somebody having a stroke? And it comes down to basic physiology. So it could be hypertension, it could be atrial fibrillation, it could be an arrhythmia. So there are things we know what the causes are, but how do you monitor all of that without really in kind of inconveniencing somebody? And I just think of that, my late mother, sadly she died a couple of years later, but that was the, it's like, how can we make it so simple that my mother would have worn it or used it or trusted it? So that was like the if you like, the personal kind of driver behind this as well.
So in comes this beautiful creation called Lifelight. First of all, I just want to let you know, I absolutely love the name. I'd love to know why you came up with the name Lifelight. I also really like the logo. When I look at it, just from an energetic standpoint, it has love in it. It's got a heart, and it has it just has a really great energy to it. So tell us a little bit about the mission and vision of Lifelight. You sort of set the stage for the problem statement, the things that you're trying to solve. Tell us how you retrofitted all of these pieces together to come up with Lifelight. What does the name mean, and what is this exactly?
That's a great question. So the pieces came together in terms of this science called remote PPG, which is the same tech as you find in a finger clip oximeter, but it's using reflected light. So you're using a camera, looking at somebody's face and picking up tiny changes in skin color, which map into their blood volume pulse. So we actually see like a pulse signal from somebody's face from skin color change. So this is all about light. It's light beams, and it's all about tracking somebody's health. So it's around preserving life. And so there was we had one of those aha moments when we were kind of doing the brand development. We thought, yeah, Lifelight, it's a positive thing. It's looking at it's using light. It's all about light in terms of the science behind this. And if you like, the logo, the branding, the heart, they all represent this kind of preservation of life, really, looking for a kind of light, contactless way of helping people to manage their health and to preserve life. So that was kind of the essence, really, of the brand and the idea.
So let's get into the technology of this. So I'm a patient, right? And I'm interested in having some of this information monitor. Tell us about what the user experience is, and what exactly is it? Is it a watch? Is it an application on my phone? Is it something that's on the web? Tell us a little bit about what the entry point is, and then take us through the user experience.
Okay, so it's actually something incredibly simple. So rather than building yet another application, first of all, it's software based. So that's been one of our mantras all the way through, is to let's not build another piece of hardware, because hardware introduces friction. It's another thing that people have to buy, they have to own, it has to be shipped somewhere. It will become outdated, it needs to be replaced, upgraded. So no hardware. We've almost got, like, you can imagine a poster in the office, just no hardware allowed. This has got to be software based. And then that goes to the next level, because we're doing things like blood pressure. So there's no cuff. There is no cuff. It's about measuring blood pressure, measuring pulse, respiration, oxygen sats, simply by using the camera on somebody's smartphone. So we're using their own existing device. And from a user experience, what we didn't want to do is build yet another platform. There are some wonderful platforms, digital platforms, that are doing really specific vertical applications in different markets. Telemonitoring, virtual calls with a physician, virtual clinical trials for pharma is massive, especially post-COVID. And all of these different instances need things like physiological measurements, blood pressure, and so on. So rather than us building yet another application, we've created this as a plugin. It's a software development kit. So our user experience is to seamlessly fit inside a partner's user experience. So if say you're a patient with hypertension and you need to be doing routine blood pressure monitoring at home, we haven't built an entire app for blood pressure monitoring. What we do is we partner with partners who have tens of thousands of patients with who are tracking every day. At the moment, they have to have a cuff. So all their app can do is go and get your cuff. They kind of nag. It says, go and get your cuff, plug it in, take a reading. Are you sitting still? Don't have any coffee, wait for 5 minutes. Right, take a measurement, tell me what it is, type it in. And or connect it to Bluetooth, connect your cuff to Bluetooth, plug it, oh, I can't see it, can you reconnect? So there's this clunky user experience, which doesn't really help with adherence. What we want to get is people to have good rituals and habits, forming kind of positive habits to routinely monitor. So we replace all of that by, we work like a plugin. So it's a bit like if you're in Facebook and somebody sends you a WhatsApp message and you just hop to WhatsApp and then you hop back again into Facebook. And with Lifelight, so we literally plug in inside of a partner's application. So it'll say time to take blood pressure reading, sit still, look into the camera for 40 seconds, ping, that's done. That's great. We've done your blood pressure. And then you carry on as you were. So that's our user experience, is to make this, it's just as simple as looking into the selfie camera for 40 seconds. We're working on making it faster, but at the moment it's 40 seconds. Our dream is to make it run in the background. So you could even be browsing, you could be watching YouTube, and we take your blood pressure reading passively. That's kind of challenging. There's also a whole host of privacy challenges to overcome in terms of consenting to say, yeah, the camera on my phone can switch on at any time and take a blood pressure reading. We'd also need to be really sure from a regulatory point of view, it was the same person sat in front of the camera that was taking those readings. So, but that was like my dream, was to make this as so passive, you don't even know that you're actually doing your blood pressure readings. So you could argue, well, a wearable could do that. And wearables can do that, and they're great, but you've got to buy a wearable. They're kind of, if you're spending $200-300, that isn't as scalable as simply using the device that you've got in your hand. We're really also passionate about developing countries. So India, you've got 600 million smartphones and limited access to healthcare. A lot of those communities can't afford to buy Apple Watches, for example. So how are they going to do that monitoring? Well, if we can use their existing mobile device, then they have their own way of doing routine monitoring.
Yeah, beautiful.
So that's the vision.
Yeah, no, lots of stuff there. And I'm actually just thinking as you're talking about this, because at the end of the day, I love the fact that you want to keep this really seamless and simple, because 100% agree, hardware and manual entry is friction. And people like automaticity, they like simplicity, where they don't have to remember to do something. So I'm actually just curious, when you're saying about something that just automatically takes your temperature, curious about that experience that we all have with Google, where you're trying to log in from a different phone and something pops up on your phone and says, is this you or not? Yes, no, maybe there's a fingerprint, and then automatically. So there would be some, immediate consent, but it's something that just pops up and is really easy to complete.
Yeah, that would work.
So just some thoughts there if your product development team wants to add that into their next sprint. But anyway, so this is really interesting stuff, because at the end of the day, we're talking about tools and things that people are using on a day-to-day basis to make their lives simple. So that's the user experience. So the question comes down to is the so what? So this temperature is checked. What other vital signs can you extract from your face?
So in fact, it isn't temperature, Natalie. It was, in fact, frustratingly, that's one that we can't do yet. So but we are working on it. It's blood pressure is the really important one. And that has the most value, really. It's also the most challenging. It's kind of the holy grail, is to do contactless blood pressure measurement. The others we can do pulse, so just simple heart rate, but breathing rate as well, respiration, and SpO2, oxygen saturation, which of course nobody had heard of until COVID. So SpO2 was kind of way down our roadmap at the beginning of last year, and then everyone was calling, the phones were hot, saying, when are you going to have SpO2? So we have SpO2, but as I say, the holy grail is blood pressure because of the importance of cardiovascular disease. So that's the really crucial one.
And we
Temperature
actually
would
talk
be,
about we talk about the traditional way that this has been done. Let's be really frank. There's the world before COVID, and now there's the world after COVID. Yes, a lot of
yes,
people starting to go back to their physicians, but I think telemedicine is here to stay. And
yeah,
as you were eloquently saying earlier, Laurence, is a lot of people were going into tools, right? So things were getting shipped to people's houses and these Bluetooth type of stethoscopes and other sorts of things. And you're simply saying, I'm having a telehealth call with caregiver, nurse, physician,
yeah,
allied healthcare provider. I have to sit in front of my camera or my computer. The camera can actually, through my face, and maybe we can talk a little bit about how that works, can actually get my blood pressure taken without me having to get any tools shipped to me or any other
exactly. Yeah.
extraneous tools. And then boom, that person gets that. So tell us a little bit about what that dynamic looks like and how does that technology work?
Okay, so the technology is we're using the camera instead of using it as a taking a photo or a video. We're looking at really specific areas of the face for, if you like, almost like a blush that's happening with every pulse beat. And then the really cool part is we look at what's called the morphology of that waveform. So we turn that into like a little trace, which is doing this, and it looks a little bit like an EKG reading. So you've got like this kind of pulse wave coming from the face. And then the shape of that is used to calculate blood pressure. We did that by measuring 1 million heartbeats. We took a big study of 8,500 patients in hospital. The story behind that's interesting because entrepreneurial optimism. I thought 5 years ago we'd have this done and ready really quickly. And we built a working prototype. I showed it to some doctors and they said, can it work with sick people? I said, well, I think so. Yeah. I mean, it works on healthy guys in the office, so I'm sure it will work. They said, well, being sure is not good enough. We need evidence. We need validation. We need to see evidence. We need lots of evidence because this is a completely, out there left field thing. We've never seen this before. So we got funding from the NHS in the UK. We ran 8,500 patient study to collect across the board. So people with hypotension, really low blood pressure, through to people with super hypertension, to make sure that we can measure everything. And what we could see through this waveform were things like arterial stiffness. So you start to see a different shape as people have higher blood pressure, a little bit like tightening a drum. So the waveform coming from that drum changes depending on the arterial stiffness. Hypotension, as people get lower blood pressure, isn't quite so straightforward because it's generally because something's broken in the system. And so pathological low blood pressure is pretty challenging. But there are ways to identify what we call features in the machine learning that identify whether somebody has high blood pressure, medium or low. And then it's been a case of extending and refining that with more and more data so that we can actually give you a measurement as opposed to just classifying you into hyper, normal, or hyper. Is that okay? That was kind of a bit sciencey, but I'm sure did that make sense in terms of the?
It really is, in my opinion, really, really cool technology. And so I'm actually just curious, like we're both sitting in front of cameras right now. What is the direction that maybe a telemedicine expert on, across the virtual world, speaking with you and meeting with you, is there what is the details that person has to give the patient in front of them? Do they have to be in a specific position in front of the camera? Is there certain parts of their face that needs to be exposed? Tell us a little bit about what it's reading and what part of the face is it looking at?
So it primarily looks at the forehead and the cheeks. We've done a huge amount of research on the different regions of interest, the areas on the face, to see which ones carry the most important, the strongest signals. So it may, if you have, I don't have the problem, but if you have like a big fringe, you have a lot of hair, you might have to just push that back to get more of a forehead in view. And wearing glasses is usually okay, but it does start to cover the cheeks, so it may help to remove glasses. When we take the reading, we made this as simple as possible, so it gives you feedback. And as well as measuring, we also check what we call signal quality. So we'll tell somebody if the room is a bit too dark or if the person's moving too much. There's a lot of literature coming out around making this kind of tech more robust to these kind of factors like lighting and motion. So there are a lot of people working globally. Things like in the car industry, automotive are interested in using this tech for, so there are other companies working on driver monitoring for driverless cars, for example. And other people are doing exercise, so kind of treadmill, have camera built in to measure your pulse when you're running, exercising. So all of that kind of body of knowledge is feeding into, if you like, this kind of whole new science of our PPG, which is really, really exciting. But our focus really is around, we see ourselves as engineers, not scientists. So we're taking this science and we're making it work in terms of, if you like, our IP. We have some patents on our algorithms, but the most important is really our clinical data. So we collect a lot of data, we record videos from patients, and we have nurses who record what we call ground truth. So they take a real measurement of blood pressure and pulse and these other vital signs using gold standard equipment. And that's recorded concurrently. So we've got video and then, if you like, the target. These are the readings that we need to match with our algorithm. So that's been our kind of work.
And so I'm assuming that through this continual AI or algorithms and using machine learning, is the system continues to get more predictive? What yes. Exactly are you doing with this aggregate data that you're collecting over time?
Exactly that. So we're working on the predictive ability. We're also, I've seen a couple of questions popping up. So one that's a very frequent one and really important is around skin color, for example. So in our earlier studies, we had a very kind of normalized population group in the UK. So over the last year, we've been running a study where we've specifically recruited more patients and more subjects with darker skin tones, so that we can be sure that the algorithm works equitably across all ethnicity. We use what's called the Fitzpatrick score, which is a measure of pigmentation to measure skin tone, to be sure, because if you try to use ethnicity, that can be quite ambiguous. There can be different grades of skin color, quite drastic changes. So that's one of our, we've got some other questions like people with beards. What we did in our data collection was to record so things like facial hair, even facial tattoos, makeup, all of these have been kind of recorded. So part of that algorithm work is making sure we can cover as many possibilities so that we can work with different skin tones, with facial hair, with levels of makeup, and all of these other kind of factors that could influence the accuracy.
Fantastic. That's fascinating. So we're in. So now that we have this, so I'm just curious. So this information is getting transmitted through your computer or phone. Now, yeah. Where does it go from there?
Okay, so this is really important in terms of privacy. So first of all, the video doesn't go anywhere outside your phone. So we take these pixel averages. We're interested in like the color change of an area of skin. So we don't need to store or record, transmit any images or videos. We take a pixel count. We send those to the cloud where our algorithm does the magic in terms of cleaning these signals and then feeding back blood pressure readings, etc., to your physician and back to the patient. And that data is completely anonymized. All we need to know is the test number. We don't need to know the patient's name or any identifiable information. But we do that in a way that the EMR or the system that the physician's using captures that information, and that's recorded against that patient. So say the virtual video consultation. Interestingly, we found from a usability with a video consultation, it's best to do this before you get to talk to your physician. And a lot of these models work with have a waiting room, a bit like Zoom. So you have like a virtual wait room before you get your consultation with the physician. So while you're sat there, that's the time when we can run Lifelight. So when you log in and you've got your physician there, they've got your vital signs up on their screen ready for that consultation.
So is there some sort, so it sounds a little bit like edge computing. So your data resides within your own particular, computer
Right.
and systems, but there's specific data that gets transmitted over, I'm assuming it's encrypted, and it gets
Yeah.
transmitted into some sort of a dashboard or a portal. Tell us a little bit about that shared space, who has access to it and what is transmitted there.
So so we destroy the images as we extract the data. So we don't hold any kind of personal data. Then the rest is down to our digital partner. So if it's a remote monitoring platform, we pass that test information, and then it goes into their secure, the way that they manage the other secure patient information. So we make sure when we're partnering that we have data sharing agreements. Everything is kind of covered from a privacy point of view, that data is secure and it's encrypted, and that's passed into their secure system, which will then feed into an EMR or wherever that data needs to be ultimately stored.
So how does this work right now, for example, maybe with an institution? Maybe somebody's listening to this right now who's saying, this would be really interesting for our physicians, for our group. We're doing a lot of telemedicine, or it could even be a small group that's just doing telemedicine. And this would be a great add-on or something as an API for their own technology. Tell us a little bit about what that collaboration partnership would look like if they wanted to connect with Lifelight.
Okay, so what we would do if we had an institution contact us, we will talk to them around which platforms are they using currently. If they're running telemedicine, then who are they using? Which platform are they working with? And then we would collaborate with that platform provider to integrate Lifelight into their product. So as I said at the beginning, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. There's so much work already done in terms of the logistics, the pathway, the way that these systems work. All we need to be is if you like, the silver bullet when it comes to measuring vital signs and being able to add that into those existing platforms. So
Absolutely.
We would partner with the tech provider who's already providing the digital platform.
Absolutely. So it really kind of begs the question about your business model. So it's a really clever little piece of technology. I understand that you are the engineers, the scientists behind it. You're not the medical experts. You're really just porting data that's really going to be effective for people to utilize and to examine. So ultimately the question comes down to is how are you making money at this? Who's ultimately paying for the software?
So that's where through partnering, we basically have a partner model where we will charge for. There are two different models really. One is for a regular user, say somebody doing remote patient monitoring with a long-term condition. Then we have a kind of per patient per month price model. Our partners will build that into their price model for the rest of their long-term condition platform. So if you like, we're adding the value because we're replacing the need for hardware. So patients at home can operate, without needing cuffs, for example. So we can then, so we're displacing all those other hardware costs and all the logistics of supplying the equipment, calibrating it, cleaning it, etc. So there's either a per patient per month, and then for other use cases like remote triage or for things like screening for high blood pressure, then it's on a per use model, so per click. So there might be larger groups of people who use this once. And so our go-to-market is around identifying. We've gone through quite a structured approach of looking at the long-term conditions, their prevalence, global regions, identifying what are the kind of the big sort of costs and impacts in healthcare, and where can vital signs measures that we can do help to impact on those costs. So it's kind of a systematic approach, and then identifying who are the partners we need to target to work with in those regions to deliver those services.
So let's actually dig into that a little bit. Tell us who your target audience is. I know that you've done a lot of, obviously you're doing extravagant research and have come up with a very elegant technology. And so I'm assuming that your entire marketing and business strategy follows the same suit. So who have you decided through all that research is your target audience by partner, by geography, by therapeutic area? What does that look like?
Okay, I can't reveal all the names, but I can give some, I can talk in terms of people. The areas that we're looking for are hypertension is the real big one because of blood pressure. We're also working on atrial fibrillation detection coming soon. So the combination of BP and AF are really important for cardiovascular disease. And the big regions for that, interestingly, there's obviously North America, Europe, also Africa, and to some extent Asia. But the most predominant are kind of the sort of Europe, North America, Africa. With the case of Africa, you've got some challenges around ability to pay. I mean, you can argue there's challenges in North America, particularly the US, in terms of how we get payments from digital health, but that's another story. But when it comes to places like Africa, then you're looking at partnering with NGOs and with the kind of, there's alternative ways to deal with these things. With if you like the Western, if you like developed countries, then there are these, we've got a number of big digital health platforms that are growing. There's quite a lot of consolidation happening as well in the market. So that's in a way getting easier to target. But as a new technology, what we've found in the early stages has been, we've been partnering with some of the challenger platforms. So people who are new, more aggressive, they want to gain market share. And that gives us the learning before we've kind of refined the product. So we've been able to learn from working with partners before we reach the stages to work with some of the bigger names in telehealth, telemonitoring. The other area we've had a lot of early interest is in the CROs, so the research organizations for virtual clinical trials. So that's another area that we are. So there's kind of stages to the go-to-market as well. The long vision is the big guys. We've had some great conversations. They're kind of watching and waiting to see our technology mature a little bit more because of the importance about getting this right. And so we're kind of starting with, if you like, more focused use cases to demonstrate efficacy. We've done a lot of work on validation, on accuracy measurements, but as anyone in medtech knows, that's just the first step. That just tells people it's safe. The next step is it useful? So we're kind of on that stage of looking at efficacy in different use cases.
Absolutely. So let's actually, you talked very much about that very important 8,500 patient clinical study that really built, if you will, your algorithm, and everything is sort of gauged from there. So tell us a little bit about other potential use cases, how this can be used, and what clinical studies are you endeavoring in order to prove efficacy or safety or some other success metrics?
Yeah, sure. So the areas that we've been looking at in the short term are screening opportunities. So identifying, a lot of this has come out of COVID because, for example, vaccination centres are, and I think this is certainly true in the UK, and I think it's pretty much global, but we've seen a lot of people who just haven't engaged with the health systems coming in and going through vaccination centres. So we're in some conversations looking at doing contactless blood pressure screening, hypertension screening. So while people, if they've had the Pfizer jab, then they have to wait for 15 minutes afterwards. So you've got this kind of group of people who can look into, we've set up iPads because they're nice and simple, it's a nice, easy interface, just to take a contactless blood pressure measurement. And then you can signpost people to say, you're good, no problem, or maybe you need to double check this when you get home, or there's a physician on site, we really recommend you have a conversation and maybe have another reading just to be sure. So there's kind of that screening opportunity to find people who are the undiagnosed. That's kind of a short-term use case. The ones that we're planning studies for are real world evaluations for areas like home blood pressure monitoring. So there's some really solid evidence from people using cuffs to do their own hypertension monitoring. If you can reduce their blood pressure over time, even by 5 millimeters over time, then you're significantly reducing stroke risk or risk of heart attack, cardiac arrest. There's a whole mountain of literature that talks around the benefits of people managing and bringing down their blood pressure. So we've got some real world evaluation studies planned where we're going to do that at scale to look at, and it's really the delta. So we're sort of, first of all, we want to see, and people like the FDA are really interested in this, just to see, first of all, can we at least do the same as a blood pressure cuff in terms of outcome? Can we achieve the same? If we could do that, then hey, there's no cuff, so we were able to achieve the same benefits in terms of population, long-term condition management and positive outcome, then that's a massive step forward, being able to do that without the need for cuffs. On top of that, you've got what we're hoping to see will be adherence. So people are much keener to continue using, just looking at their phone, instead of needing the whole kind of process of using a cuff, connecting it, putting it on their arm, taking measurements. So that's one we're really excited about. And then we've got other ones with, there's virtual clinical trials that I mentioned as well. So there's some work we're doing there on planning a study to, again, there'll be some comparators involved in the study to look at cuff versus Lifelight. And then another interesting use case is care homes. So that's been a really topical issue through COVID, and the kind of remote assessment of and tracking for deterioration. So you're looking for seniors in a care home who might be deteriorating, who haven't been monitored, or there's all of the physical access now in terms of COVID restrictions. So simplifying that and enabling care home staff or carers to be able to take measurements from those seniors. So those are 3 examples where we're looking at kind of real world efficacy and data.
Laurence, it just sounds absolutely incredible and amazing. And the use cases are just so extensible and inexhaustible. Everything from real world evidence, payers being able to use this, employers, and I just see so many use cases with this. It's incredible. But let's actually
employee assistance programs, all of those kind of areas. There's a lot of them, which is why our go-to-market is a partner model, because there are just way too many opportunities for this tech for us to try to address them all.
One thing that I think is really significant here, and I think that you obviously going to be running with this, is everybody is looking for methodologies and ways to reduce the cost of healthcare system. And it's just, that's a behemoth in itself. But there's little bits and pieces of things that we do in a day-to-day in an automatic way that's part of like regular checkups, regular evaluations of patients. And a huge piece of this is taking people's blood pressure. So if you're looking at just soup to nuts and comparing the cost of a cuff versus everybody's got a phone, right? Or somebody's going to be able to do this, and just intrinsically thinking about the opportunity to completely remove that cost from the system, how does one validate the use of Lifelight? So with all of that said, is Lifelight being considered as an FDA approved digital therapeutic? And if so, would it be going through a 510K? What would be the regulatory pathway for this as a product?
Right. So it's not a digital therapeutic, it's a measuring device technically, and we are going through de novo because there just isn't a predicate that we can point to say we're exactly the same as those guys over there. So we've got some very good conversations with FDA, but it does need to take the de novo route because it is so novel. So we're also highly advanced we're more advanced with Europe in terms of CE marking. We've been going through that process for 2 years. So the problem with Europe the challenge has been the introduction of MDR, medical device regulation, which is introduced a kind of much higher bar, and quite rightly for all sorts of good reasons, to the rigor required for new devices, but we were kind of applying just at that transitory stage. So we've basically almost had to do the job twice in Europe in terms of going through medical device approval. But all of the data, all of the evidence, all of the quality control, the verification is all applicable to FDA and to other markets for their regulatory authorities as well. So we're trying to do the job as few times as possible, but there are inevitably differences between each regulatory authority. So it's quite challenging because it is a new technology, but that's part of the challenge and the fun of pioneering is learning this regulatory process. So, and that's something we've kind of pride ourselves on as if you like, a USP against other entrants on this technology, because we've been doing this for 5 years. So we've worked through the full kind of quality management system approach. Everything is kind of tested, verified, validated. We've run numbers of usability studies. It sounds really usable, but that's not good enough. You have to prove the usability. You've got to prove it with different cohorts. You've got to show that an end user at home who hasn't been trained, a naive user, is able to download this and operate it and get a successful reading. Until you've done that, you can't expect regulatory approval. So all of these steps have to be kind of planned and sort of delivered through the right agencies.
Yeah. So it actually, I mean, one would think if you were to really sort of put it out there and say, could Lifelight, as an example, one day replace blood pressure cuffs? I mean, that really is the end goal, and how much cost savings in any healthcare system could have globally. That is obviously going to open to the door to many, many potential competitors coming into the market. So we're, apart from IP, what do you think is really Lifelight's, plan of action to compete against smaller incumbents? And is there a need to, for example, compete maybe with Apple, besides the friction involved with the with the smartwatch, but saying that they could just build it into their own camera system? Would it be a competing against an Apple, or would the plan be to one day just have them integrate Lifelight, whatever, purchase, merger, acquisition, or whatever? Would that be sort of the trajectory you would see?
So we've had some really good conversations along this pathway with Apple, with other manufacturers, with the chipset producers for Android. And what's really important to us is to make sure we maintain, we've got to do this job properly. We had some great feedback from the big manufacturers saying, if we were going to do this in-house, we would do it the way you guys are doing it, which is this rigorous but painful kind of clinically data-driven approach. So that's encouraging feedback. But I mean, there is always that risk that bigger players would wait and see what happens and then do it themselves. All I would say on that is it has taken us 5 years, and there's a huge learning curve involved in this. And it's not a case of if we'd had 1,000 engineers on day one, we would have done it faster, because you've got to go through these processes of collecting clinical data and then realizing what the data was you should have collected. And then you go back and you do another study and you lock down the camera, you get better camera recordings. All of these things come through a learning curve. And that's really the same for our other entrants. To be honest, it's been great having competitors, because it really helps to validate what we're doing. It shows this isn't kind of fairy dust. We're doing something that's real. There are other people entering the market. And so that's kind of driving us to make sure we get through the kind of regulatory milestones that we've got planned. We've also got some really exciting plans on looking for other measures. I mentioned atrial fibrillation. We're looking also at blood glucose, which in itself would be massive for the diabetes market. So there's a really exciting roadmap, and it's all about kind of so the competition just brings that urgency and pace, which is what we're all about. So it's kind of a good thing.
Yeah, you obviously have IP specifically in what we talked about, the sensors around the skin and the fluctuation in temperature and what have you. But has there ever been consideration in the roadmap of a partnership with a company, for example, that does eye scanning or retinal scanning, and actually really expand the number of diagnoses that you can do with just a video?
Absolutely. And I mean, beyond that, there's some really, really cool technologies that are using sound as well. I'm not revealing any kind of confidential deals or anything, but there are. I'm watching. You know, we're watching these kind of technologies and thinking there are huge synergies, because if you're collecting vital signs, then you know imagine if you could also be doing other stuff with. I think this is one of the things in terms of what I'm looking forward to in the coming years is more convergence, really, so that we center this stuff around the patient. You know, it's kind of, we've come from this very clunky, so really what we've done in digital is rebuild the, if you like, the old analog way of everything is compartmentalized in healthcare. You've got specialists, you go to different clinics, you see different people, and we've just ended up building a whole host of apps that replicate that in digital. And what would be wonderful is to really make this patient-centered, to say it's the same person here, the same patient with the same face. Let's combine these technologies and just make this much more simplified and consistent.
Not getting all controversial here, but we've all been hearing about the big tech court case of the decade, which is the Theranos situation.
Yeah.
Realizing that was kind of a similar vision, which is bring all these disparate tests and everything into this one small black box, and away we go. Are you running into any resistance to that vision, to the things that you're planning, because of what has happened in that situation?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, part of me would have loved to have met their investors, to have people that were willing to part with money with so little due diligence. I kind of, we quite rightly have to jump through huge amounts of hoops with investors, and the more novel the technology, the more kind of scrutiny that we have to disclose our data. We've got to show every step of what we're doing to convince people to put money in. So it just amazes me, that story of how there's that kind of hubris, and we hear it time and again in different markets, that people get picked up on this wave of enthusiasm, and it's almost like the emperor's new clothes. Nobody dares to stop and say, am I the only one in the room thinking this looks too good to be true? So we have a lot of scrutiny, and I've not noticed a change since the Theranos kind of story broke, and it's been bubbling for a few years now. So obviously the current court case has made it more prominent, but it was one of those amazing stories that you just think, how did that happen? How could investors have had the wool pulled over their eyes for so long, and all these bright people, that were taken into this kind of story is incredible.
Absolutely. We've talked about so many incredible things here, and this is just truly, breathtaking new technology and really, really bleeding edge. We've talked about AI, machine learning, computer vision, all kinds of things and use cases in healthcare and beyond. I mean, quite frankly, there's multiple verticals and use cases, including potentially monitoring people for DUIs, and police forces can use this and all kinds of things. I think one of our viewers just posted that as a comment. But what are your predictions, based on what you're doing and delving into? What do you sort of foresee happening in the next 10 to 20 years in healthcare, and specifically in digital health?
I think that the big lesson after COVID has been adoption. So we've all of us in this sector have been kind of wondering how we're going to persuade, and it's like a kind of chicken and egg situation, because patients need to be convinced, but also their clinicians need to be convinced that this tech can work and that's going to be useful. And COVID just changed that overnight. People didn't have the choice; they had to do things remotely. So I think what's encouraging is we've seen a drop in digital uptake, but it hasn't gone back to pre-COVID levels. So there is a kind of new normal in terms of digital. But I think from there, what we're going to see is ubiquity. This is going to happen. It will be the normal way of delivering healthcare will be virtually. I mentioned convergence. That's one of my other beliefs, is that we will start to see more patient-centered kind of approaches. So you don't have like 5 different things. If you've got The problem with senior healthcare is people have comorbidities. A lot of people have diabetes, also have maybe 2 or 3 other conditions. And so at the moment, they're all treated separately with different tech, different bits of hardware. It would just be brilliant to see that simplified, and the cost savings and efficiencies would be massive. I've got a kind of wish list here of future projections. So the thing building on all of this, I think, is insights. We've been hoping for a long time to see more kind of predictive ability, to see, so what, from all this data, from all these wearables, from Lifelight, what can we learn that we can then use to improve outcomes or prevent problems from happening? And I think building on this, I think that's going to be really important, is predictive kind of health, which, that's been waiting for all this good data, because telehealth could never really get there. It was difficult, expensive, hard to scale. So we should start to see really good predictive technologies. And then the final thing for me would be digital therapeutics. I think the next step on from that is give those insights back to the patient and help them to actually treat themselves, make lifestyle changes, kind of really innovative ideas coming out now. And I'm hoping Lifelight will be part of that. If you can see your live blood pressure in your app and see that you're making improvements, then we can actually start to treat blood pressure as well as diagnose or spot it. So that's
yeah, it becomes the motivating dopamine drip that people need for basically moving from reactive, sick care to well care. So fascinating stuff. Yeah. I love the vision of Lifelight. I find it truly leading edge technology. Lots of great thought. It was not one of these things that was just sort of thrown up on and patchwork together. There was truly a lot of thought, strategy, and planning that's gone into it. So truly looking forward to watching this from the sidelines, as I'm sure you'll be soaring through the skies. So anybody who's listening to the show, if you're interested in connecting with Laurence, learning more about Lifelight Xim Ltd, what you can do to partner, include in clinical trials, what have you, we encourage you to check out his contact details. We'll be leaving those in the show notes below, so please be sure to check that out. If you enjoyed this conversation, we also encourage you to check out impetusdigital.com. These are the kinds of conversations that we have with the Laurences of the world, interesting, innovative companies working with physicians, payers, allied healthcare providers, and patients themselves to come up with new solutions, ideas, platforms, moving things through regulatory and legal challenges. We do this asynchronously and synchronously using our white glove service and a series of tools so that you can move your agenda forward. So check that out as well. I want to thank everybody for their time. Please like and subscribe to our channel. And we really appreciate if you can leave some feedback on iTunes. Thank you so much, everybody. And Laurence, this was an outstanding conversation.
And great to speak to you, Natalie. Thanks again for inviting me on.